A quiet sigh, barely audible, escaped her lips as she looked down at her trembling hands. They held not a dream but a heavy choice. In her heart, a silent plea echoed, wishing someone, anyone, could truly see the unseen battle she fought every day. But in just a few moments, everything she believed about her place in the world, about kindness, and about the deep ache of being misunderstood would be tested in a way she never imagined. Have you ever felt like you were standing at a crossroads, where your heart pulled one way and the world pushed another? Tell us in comments. Before we begin, hit subscribe. It's appreciated. It was an ordinary morning for Aisha. She was on the subway, her backpack resting lightly on her lap, heading to the job she loved. But that felt miles away from the life her strict mother wanted for her. Her mother saw success only as a marriage certificate to a wealthy family, a future already planned out, neat and secure. But Aisha's heart was in the world of art and community, a messy, beautiful world that her mother dismissed as a waste of time. Every morning, the train ride was a small pocket of freedom, the only time she felt like just Aisha, not someone's daughter or future wife. She watched the city blur by, a kaleidoscope of faces and lights, thinking about the small, independent coffee shop where she worked. It wasn't the fancy corporate job her mom demanded, but the work felt honest. She was saving every dollar, every cent, a secret fund meant for a tiny art studio, a key to unlock her own life. That quiet determination was the only thing keeping the heavy weight of her mother's disappointment at bay. Today, though, the weight felt heavier. A letter lay folded in her coat pocket, a final ultimatum from home. She closed her eyes for a moment, gripping the letter until her knuckles were white. She didn't know it yet, but the smallest thing that would happen outside of her usual routine today would make her realize the kind of strength she truly needed. It wouldn't come from money or a wealthy name, but from a moment of pure, unexpected human connection. If you were in her place, constantly fighting for your own path against the wishes of the people you loved, what would you have done? Tell us in the comments. Aisha arrived at the small coffee shop, the bell above the door chiming its familiar welcome. She put on her apron, the soft cloth a comforting shield against the world outside. The coffee shop was a meeting place for everyone, a true mix of the city, and she loved the quiet rhythm of making drinks and the quick, kind smiles she exchanged with regulars. But today, the quiet was broken by a coldness she hadn't felt here before. A new customer, an older man in an expensive suit, stood by the counter, waiting. As Aisha approached, his eyes didn't meet hers. They looked past her, as if she were a piece of furniture, not a person. When she asked for his order, her voice was warm and clear, but his reply was clipped and sharp, filled with a subtle impatience. He didn't use her name or even look at the name tag she wore proudly. He simply pointed at the menu with a detached finger. As she prepared his complex drink, her movements were professional, yet inside, a small, familiar ache began. It wasn't the difficulty of the order. It was the way he had dismissed her whole presence, a judgment in his posture that spoke volumes before a single word was truly exchanged. It was the quiet pain of being seen through a filter of assumption about who she was, where she belonged, and how little her own dreams mattered. It was a feeling she knew too well, a gentle, constant pressure from the world that told her she had to work twice as hard just to be considered equal. The line behind him grew, and a young woman accidentally bumped Aisha's arm, causing a tiny splash of milk to stain the pristine white cuff of the suited man's shirt. It was a minor mistake, easily fixed, but the man reacted with loud, unnecessary anger. His voice, now raised, carried across the quiet space. He wasn't angry about the milk. He was angry that a small mistake had come from her. He used a tone that suggested incompetence, looking down at her from his height with an air of superiority. The other customers grew silent, and the air thickened with discomfort. Aisha's face burned, not just from embarrassment, but from the sudden, public exposure of that invisible judgment she usually felt only in silence. She stood there, cleaning the counter, her hands steady despite the tremor inside her heart. Every smile she'd practiced, every effort to be helpful, suddenly felt small against the force of his prejudice. She wanted to disappear, to hide from the coldness in his eyes. He didn't see Aisha, the dedicated student, the hopeful artist, the daughter fighting for her own life. He just saw a stereotype, a service worker he felt entitled to treat as less than. But in that quiet moment of heartbreak, as she looked down at the stain, something inside her began to shift. The intense pressure from her mother's demands and the sudden cruelty of this stranger both demanded she be someone she wasn't. And for the first time, Aisha felt a true sense of defiance rise. She realized she couldn't let his smallness make her small. Have you ever carried pain in silence, hoping one day someone would truly see you? Tell us in the comments. She finished the drink, sliding it across the counter with a quiet dignity he couldn't take away. The moment of pure injustice leaving a bitter, strong taste in the air that was much harder to swallow than the coffee. The silence after the man's outburst was heavy, thick with unspoken judgment. Aisha was finishing her shift, wiping down the counter repeatedly, her movements mechanical. She could still feel the weight of his stare, the sting of being belittled. Just then she saw the man again, standing by the exit, talking loudly on his phone. As he turned, a small worn leather wallet slipped from his pocket, landing unnoticed on the polished floor. A wave of conflicting emotions hit Aisha instantly. She could have left it. She could have ignored him, given the way he had treated her, given how small he had made her feel moments earlier. It would have been a silent, understandable act of defiance. Her heart hammered against her ribs, the noise louder than the rush hour traffic outside. This was the moment of truth. Every word her mother had drilled into her about reputation and every cruel look from the stranger seemed to hang in the air, pulling her in different directions. Aisha looked at the wallet, realizing the small objects inside held a person's life. The world's noise faded. She decided not to let the rich man's cruelty define her, refusing to sink to his level. Taking a breath, she picked it up and walked to him. When she touched his arm, he turned annoyed but froze when he saw the wallet. His confident posture crumbled into shock. A flicker of shame crossed his face, a sudden realization of his terrible behavior. Aisha just held out the wallet, letting her simple, honest act of kindness speak the undeniable truth. In that powerful moment, she realized she didn't need others to see her worth. She had to see herself first. By choosing kindness over bitterness, she found a quiet strength. The man offered a barely audible "thank you," a significant crack in his hardened exterior. The ensuing silence held the promise of change. Aisha walked away with a new understanding. She didn't need an apology. The choice of kindness over bitterness had shifted something deep inside. The fear of disappointing her mother and failing the world's expectations felt lighter. She realized her true value was in her character, not wealth or narrow-minded approval. Though the world hadn't changed, Aisha had. Her shame about her job and her hidden dreams vanished. The man's prejudice was his issue, and her mother's pressure was rooted in fear, not love. By choosing humanity and injustice, Aisha finally gave herself permission to be herself, showing strength in the quietest, most powerful way. The next morning, she finally took the secret savings she had hidden away. She didn't buy a fancy dress or a ticket out of town. Instead, she put a deposit down on a small, old studio space down the street. It was tiny, needed paint, and smelled faintly of dust, but it was hers. It was a home for her art, a place where she could grow without permission. She wrote a careful, respectful letter to her mother, explaining that she loved her, but she had to choose a life that was true to her own heart. The marriage proposal was a safety net her mother wanted, but Aisha realized she was strong enough to build her own safety net. One thread of kindness and courage at a time. She learned that sometimes the hardest battles we fight are not with others, but with the pressure inside us to conform to an unfair world. Every small act of kindness, every moment of choosing dignity over anger, was a spark against the dark. That's how change begins, not with loud arguments, but with hearts that refuse to stop feeling, no matter how much the world tries to numb them. Aisha continued working at the coffee shop, but now she walked with a different confidence. She knew her worth, and that was the greatest wealth of all. She realized that by standing strong in her own truth, she wasn't just fighting for her life. She was living it. What part of this story stayed with you the most? Tell us in the comments, show some love with a like, and subscribe to stay inspired.